things that I want to stress today as part of my platform from a pro-choice perspective, that the important thing to remember is not to legislate one's conscience. The role of government is to maintain spaces of autonomy at the individual level and at the level of the family. If not, we may as well institute anyone's religious program, which is what tyrannical governments always do. They are not Republican or Democratic. The real question is, how far can political communities, from the cities to the states to the nations, go to make the conditions for having children as beneficial as possible? To be fair, I think this likely includes some kind of regulation or restrictions on trimester abortions. At some point, the question of rights involves an other. In the same way that we regulate other things, there's always the notion of public good. We ought to be able to do this in some ways when something extends to the point of like excessive, right? So if you think about in a free society, most people would agree that people ought to be able to consume, distribute, and make pornography. But at some point, when you involve the abuse of children or other kinds of human rights violations, there has to be some kind of regulation. Someone has to step in for the public health of the community. I'd say the same thing goes for guns. We are always trying to balance the rights of individuals with the role of government to ensure the best possible outcomes. Private autonomy is critical to maintain in a Christian or Republican context. So when it comes to fetal deformities, Down syndrome, or any fetal anomalies, we have to ask bigger questions about the political health of our communities. In fact, many of the things that impact a couple's choice to have a child are determined by political health. Are there jobs available? Do they have health care? Is there communal support to raise the child? The real crime is not the choice to have an abortion when fetal anomalies are present. The real crime is not having resources available for kids with disabilities. I also have to echo Sister Joan Shinster. She's a Catholic nun, and she says that the pro-life movement in a lot of ways is pro-birth. She said they want babies born, but they don't want babies fed or housed or cared for. And she says that they don't because they don't want any money to go there. Okay, so let's see number 6. So what if making abortion illegal forces some women into dangerous back alley abortions? So the question is not what if. We know from the data that women do resort to dangerous abortions when they're not legally available. And the women who are the most affected by this always end up being poor women of color. Back alley abortions, what we call back alley abortions, jumped 30 times in Texas after laws were passed to restrict women's access to abortions. Making it hard for women to get abortions only creates more difficulty for those who are already struggling. And it's important to remember that these choices are often made within the context of coercion or fear. So again, the political strategies aimed at making abortion illegal do not keep women from having them, but keep certain women from having them. We know from the data that poor women of color will suffer the most, while white women will always be able to obtain the abortions that they need by medically trained doctors, while the women who will die from botched illegal abortions always are, again, women of color. The women who will be forced to carry unwanted fetuses to term are precisely the ones who can least afford it. They are poor, underage, uneducated, often unmarried or without a partner. Women who are without a solid network or support system. So to ignore these realities is to ignore the reason why women have abortion. So I don't believe, and this is some of the rhetoric that comes out of the pro-life movement sometimes, I don't believe that women are having abortions because they want to live selfish lives. I think the majority are having abortions because they know intuitively that they are going to be solely responsible for taking care of that child, physically, emotionally, and financially. Some of us watched our own mothers do it, some of us have even done it ourselves. Mothers are still responsible for the majority of childcare, making it difficult to keep a paid job when you're raising children. We also know that 60% of the women who have abortions already have children. So some of them do it for the children that they already have. Anti-choicers want to say, as was stated during this talk, that a 4-year-old is the same as a fertilized ovum because both have the requisite 46 chromosomes necessary for human life. But to compare an actual with potential seems to me propaganda. The best we can do is encourage as many women, men, and families to not get into the position of having an unintended pregnancy in the first place, which is why an emphasis on contraception has to be a part of this debate. You know, I've had these conversations. I mean, they always end up being like once every 2 years or something like that. But I had this talk with a guy named Trent Horn, who was a Catholic guy who was arguing on behalf of the pro-life position. And I said at some point during the talk, I said, well, at least we can agree on one thing. We both want to see less abortions. And he said, no, that's not my goal. And he said, my goal is to affirm the dignity of human life, and hopefully, as a direct result, abortions will be lower, but that's not my goal. And I was really shocked by that, because I thought that was at least one point with which we could find some room to dialogue, but the goals and aims of both movements seem completely different. Because just like Seth said, he considers himself to be pro-choice in a range of different things, as I consider myself to be pro-life in a lot of different ways. So to affirm the dignity of human life is something that I've spent my whole career thinking about and working on. So when it comes to the reproductive rights issues, sometimes we seem like we're at an impasse. So number 7, how does the baby's ability to feel pain impact the question of a woman's right to an abortion? So first, with dealing with the topic of abortion, I really think, especially in a forum like this, we have to widen the frame a little bit to talk more broadly about a concept called reproductive justice, which came out of Black women organizing in the 1990s to end reproductive oppression. Those who are most economically disadvantaged and those facing the greatest disparities in access to quality health care remain to be those who are on the margins of society. So this includes poor women of color, those disproportionately affected by cervical and breast cancer, HIV, and other transmitted diseases. So we've asked about a fetus's ability to feel pain and how that impacts the right to an abortion. I can't help but wonder, sort of instinctively, about the pain and suffering that women endure as a direct result of reproductive inequality, and how these inequalities sometimes lead to the very choice to end an unplanned pregnancy. This says nothing of the painful sterilization procedures being used today on people with disabilities around the world. Talking about a fetus's ability to feel pain feels like one more way to shame women. So the last question that we were asked to address is, how does a baby's need to be loved impact the abortion question? So this is a tough for me because in all of the questions we're talking about, the questions that are being asked are about a baby, and I really understand in terms of embryology, a fetus is the proper term to use when talking about a child in utero. So when we talk about, like, I think it's important to always remember that we're talking about fetuses and then babies are born. So after the child is born, it becomes a baby. So when I was thinking about this question, it was confusing to me. So I was thinking about other questions that might be used as a response. So something like, how would an immigrant's need to feel loved impact your view on DACA, or immigration reform? How does a Muslim's need to be loved impact your view on the travel ban aimed at Muslim majority nations? How does a Syrian child's need to be loved impact your view on U.S. intervention with regard to the Syrian civil war? And I know I've seen some faces of annoyance as I'm asking those questions, and it feels a little bit similar to me. So current trends within the pro-life movement are part of these broader trends in political life, which are making it difficult to distinguish social justice from its opposite. While this often happens in unjust or unscrupulous regimes, in this context, the lives of fetuses are being more closely considered and elevated above the rights of women who are carrying them. And this speaks nothing of the unacceptable treatment of immigrants or police brutality against Black and brown women, men, and children. So sometimes what I'm noticing is that within the pro-life movement, powerlessness is being elevated to an ideal, something one can put on and then shed when useful. For example, anti-abortion activists, who are often religiously conservative, regularly conflate abortion with genocide. Some pro-life activists even picket abortion centers In fact, 1/4, 25% of all abortion clinics have experienced acts of severe violence, including death threats, bombs, and chemical attacks. In just 1 year, pro-life activists threw butyric acid into 19 clinics in Florida, Louisiana, and Texas, injuring patients and workers. It's a curious strategy by people who claim to support life. I want to close with a quote from John Paul II when he said, quote, "Christ taught another way. It is that of respect for human beings. The priority of every method of research must be to know the truth about human beings in order to serve them and not to manipulate them according to a project sometimes arrogantly seen as better even than the plan of the Creator." When Pope John Paul II writes about the truth, he means a biblical truth, which is offered as an alternative to what could be considered valueless empiricism. And the project he refers to is liberalism, with its accent on the individual and the pursuit of happiness. It's important to note that the Pope is not discounting scientific methods of research so long as they include an investigation of the truth about human beings as a whole, for example, political or religious, and not only personalized truths. Elevating the fetus to the status of a person and then pitting their rights against the rights of the woman carrying that fetus reduces her to a mere vessel of reproduction. This is both inhumane and unjust. There's a story that I sometimes tell about, you may have heard it before, a woman named Sister Lucy Vertruse. She's a nun who was raped during the Bosnian War. During a time when it was estimated about 50,000 women and girls were the victims of rape. Most of them were Muslim. Sister Lucy Vertruse ended up becoming pregnant as a result of the rape. And again, Pope John Paul II, was the Pope at the time, he said that these nuns who have been so painfully violated need to be rallied around by their communities to transform an act of violence into an act of love and welcome. Sister Lucy Vertruse wrote a letter to her Mother Superior. She said, I'm going to quote her, "Someone has to begin to break the chain of hatred that has always destroyed our countries. And so I will teach my child one thing, love. This child born of violence will be a witness, along with me, that the only greatness that gives honor to a human being is forgiveness." This choice that Sister Lucy made is a true testament to her faithful commitment. It is an example that she set to her community and to her congregation. It makes sense because of her religious beliefs. And Sister Lucy reminds us that there's a price to be paid for an ethical stance. When it comes to Sister Lucy, this was an impossible choice. But what makes it so beautiful is that she committed to making it. It was her personal faith and not the state that informed her decision. And while it was right for her, that choice might not be right for someone else. These choices are always difficult, but they can be elevated in a context where choice is protected. Without choice, there would have been nothing remarkable about what Sister Lucy did. You can't always force people to make the right choices. This can't be imposed. It is a practice. It has to be cultivated. But in the absence of community engagement and without the exaltation of families to determine their reproductive lives, all people can do is look to the state for more regulation. Thank you.